Today's topic was requested by several of you guys in the comments section earlier this week. I told you guys that I would look into what's going on with Kwame Brown, and I did. And by the way, make sure to check in tomorrow. I have been hard on Tim Tebow the last couple of weeks, but I'm going to defend Tim Tebow tomorrow. The woke brigade over at ESPN, Stephen A. Smith, Max Kellerman, we are going off on them tomorrow for their take on why Tim Tebow is getting a chance in Jacksonville. You don't want to miss it. But let's go ahead and get into today first. Kwame Brown, before this week, I hadn't heard the name Kwame Brown in, 10, 15 years. To be honest, I'd forgotten all about him. Mainly because he had a forgettable NBA career for the most part. Let me give you a brief history lesson to my younger audience who either wasn't alive or was just too young to remember Kwame Brown. Because you really need to know the backstory so you have a better understanding of what I'm talking about today. Back in 2001, Kwame Brown made history by being the first high school player drafted number 1 overall in the NBA. He was drafted by the Washington Wizards, who at the time had an all-time great player on the roster, the best player in league history, Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was nearing the end of he was at the end of his career. He was trying one last time for another ring. You don't hear much about Michael Jordan's days with the Washington Wizards because nothing much of consequence really happened. Perhaps the biggest story of that time was Kwame Brown. Of the all-time draft bust in the history of the NFL and the NBA, Kwame Brown lands near the top of the list. I think Jamarcus Russell is the number 1 bust of all time in any league. But Kwame Brown's definitely in the top 10, maybe even top 5. I would say top 10 though, because even though he wasn't impressive on the court, at least in terms of being a number 1 overall pick, Kwame Brown still played 13 seasons in the NBA. Jamarcus Russell, on the other hand, he was out of the NFL in 3 years. He literally ate his way out of millions of dollars. Dude was fat and out of shape. Not surprisingly, he was also lazy. I've told this story before, but I'm going to mention it again. There's a story about how Jamarcus Russell's career came to an end. The Raiders were heading into their bye week. Offensive coordinator or one of the offensive coaches, he gave Jamarcus Russell some game film for the opponent the following week after the bye. He told him to watch it over his bye week, and when they returned, he wanted to know his thoughts on how they should attack the defense. Raiders, they returned from their bye week. The coach asked Jamarcus Russell his thoughts on the film. Jamarcus Russell goes into this elaborate scheme of what they can do, the weak spots on the defense, blah, 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 blah. The coach looks at him, says that the damn tape is blank, nothing on it. Basically proving that Jamarcus Russell was so lazy and uncommitted, he couldn't even take a few minutes to pop the tape into his VCR. After that happened, his career was over. I've never heard of any stories like that about Kwame Brown. No one's ever accused him of being lazy. At 18 years old, he had more pressure put on him than arguably any other player drafted number 1 in the history of the NBA. You're coming straight out of high school. You're a kid. And you're paired with an aging Michael Jordan, who was notoriously hard to play with. And I imagine he was even harder to play with during his time in Washington because he couldn't dominate the way he did in his prime. His skill set was diminishing. Great players don't handle that well. Michael Jordan was so hard on Kwame Brown that he made him cry during practice. So while Kwame Brown's definitely a bust, you can't say his NBA career was an abject failure. Now let's get into what transpired this week. Since his NBA career's ended, Kwame Brown has rode off into the sunset. Hasn't bothered anyone. We haven't heard from him. Hell, like I said, I forgot the dude even existed until this week. Gilbert Arenas was a guest on the All the Smoke podcast. I guess I should say award-winning All the Smoke podcast, since they constantly say that about themselves. The show is hosted by former NBA stars Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson. Somehow the topic of Kwame Brown came up. Gilbert Arenas played with him 4 years in Washington. And to his credit, Gilbert Arenas started out trying to be cordial, talking kind of nice about Kwame Brown, at least to begin with. He said he had the potential to be the best ever #1 pick coming out of high school, but had the misfortune of starting his career on the same team that Michael Jordan was ending his. Kind of like the same thing I said just a second ago. After that, though, that's where things took a turn. Gilbert Arenas then called Kwame Brown a man-child, a show pony, and he was bragging about how he took over the team from Kwame Brown as a second-round draft pick. The entire time, Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson are just fueling the fire, which is fine. That's fine. That's their job as podcast hosts. If you feel like you have a guest that's being controversial, you fuel the fire. Howard Stern made a career of doing that. Kwame Brown then takes to YouTube and unloads on all three of these guys for over an hour. He calls Steven Jackson a fake gangster turned fake social justice warrior. Sounds about right. Kwame Brown hit the nail on the head with that one. He says Matt Barnes is a tragic mulatto and Gilbert Arenas is an Uncle Tom who perpetuated the bus narrative by being a bad teammate to him. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that's just Kwame Brown speaking out of anger. There's nothing Gilbert Arenas could have done to save Kwame Brown from being labeled a bust. Unless he was a 25-10 guy, which he wasn't even close. Kwame Brown was going to be a bust. There was too much hype around him coming into the league. Matt Barnes, after Kwame Brown's rant airs on YouTube, Matt Barnes goes on the jump on ESPN, otherwise known as the gathering of the NBA wokers, and he responds to Kwame Brown. He acts all surprised that Kwame Brown's pissed off and said that if he wants to be mad at anyone, be mad at Michael Jordan for drafting him. Steven Jackson wasn't as cordial about it. He went on Instagram, and here's what he said. Quote, "Your whole career was dirt. Your whole life is dirt, and it ain't my job to pour more dirt on you." End quote. So much to digest off of one little sentence. First of all, Steven Jackson really doesn't make any sense here. He personally attacks Kwame Brown. He attacks him on his podcast. But then he says that it's not his job to pour more dirt on him. That's exactly what he's been doing all week, pouring dirt on Kwame Brown. Kwame Brown was off in Georgia somewhere, minding his own business. Your podcast awoke a sleeping giant. And secondly, if Kwame Brown's life is dirt, please give me that life. Dude made over $63 million throughout his NBA career. Call him a bust all you want. I would call that success. He bought his mom a house on a golf course at 18 years old. He's set for life. He never has to work again. A 13-year NBA career is far from what I would call failure, or dirt, as Steven Jackson prefers to call it. I would call that an African-American success story. Now, Kwame Brown, he can be a bit delusional at times. On one of his YouTube rants, he actually took credit for Kobe Bryant scoring 81 points in a game. He said that Kobe wouldn't have been able to do that without him. Obviously, that is just delusional. Kobe Bryant in his prime, he could score at will. He could have put up 60 points every game if he wanted to, but he knew he needed everyone else involved to win. Let me tell you the problem, though, I have with Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson. Kwame Brown touched on this a little bit in one of his videos. We talk about hypocrisy in the NBA all the time. Lately, we've been talking about it damn near every day. Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson are huge supporters and promoters of Black Lives Matter, the organization. They're always talking about uplifting people in the black community. In other words, they're woke. Steven Jackson was in the forefront of the defund the police movement last summer. If police were defunded, it wouldn't affect Steven Jackson. I'm sure he has private security. Defunding the police would affect the very communities that Steven Jackson and Matt Barnes claim they are fighting for. Anyway, back to the hypocrisy. they're always talking about uplifting other African Americans. They'll attack any white person who is critical of something in the black culture or a person. Yet, here they are, tearing down Kwame Brown. Their race based agenda has worked for them. It got them an award for their podcast, it gets them guest spots on woke ESPN. But it's the height of hypocrisy when it comes to Kwame Brown, which is why I say on here all the time there is no way to win being woke, because the agenda is based on hypocrisy. The woke rules are for everyone else to follow, except the wokers themselves. Let me give you another example. Remember last year when Deshaun Jackson posted those anti-Semitic remarks? His exact words were, quote, "Because the white Jews know that the Negroes are the real children of Israel, and to keep America secret, the Jews will blackmail America," end quote. I never knew black people originated from Israel, but I'm not a Middle Eastern scholar, so what the hell do I know? I could be wrong. Stephen Jackson threw in his 2 cents. Now remember, Stephen Jackson is a unifier. He's woke. His goal is to unify people of all races, supposedly. He commented on the post and said, Deshaun Jackson is speaking the truth. Someone please tell me, what is truthful about what Deshaun Jackson said? When have the Jews blackmailed America? If any race has just cause to cry racism, it's the Jews. They have been discriminated against since the beginning of time. Hell, Hitler tried to wipe them off the earth and damn near succeeded. Do you ever hear them whine about it? No. They get their revenge by starting businesses and making millions. There has been some speculation that the whole beef between Matt Barnes, Stephen Jackson, and Kwame Brown is manufactured for ratings, that it's fake. I don't believe that to be the case. I think this happened organically. And I think Kwame Brown comes out of this thing looking good. While Stephen Jackson and Matt Barnes, they look like fools. They look like woke fools, which is always the case when you pit someone with common sense and truth on their side against two wokers. If you get into a battle of wits with a woker, you always win because their agenda is built on a myth and lies. All right, what do you guys think of this ongoing feud between Kwame Brown, Matt Barnes, and Stephen Jackson? Tell me who you think is right and who's wrong. I actually encourage you to check out Kwame Brown's rants on YouTube. The videos are a little bit long, but it's worth it. Sound off in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts. Make sure to like and subscribe. Click the notification bell to receive all notifications from the channel. Best way to contact me is by email at btlkc84@gmail.com, KC_BTL84 on Twitter. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Don't miss tomorrow.